Okay, ABCs of school funding, school problems of central cities and fast-growing suburbs. In older cities, communities, and the major school construction issues is the repair renovations of old school buildings. Many of these of which are in poor condition because of the systematic neglect of city governments. In the late 1998, for example, the chief executive of District Columbus announced a plan to spend up to $1 billion in school repairs over the next 10 years. Footnote 3. And in early 1999, the New York City Board of Education estimated it would be spend $11 billion for school construction over the next 5 years. In response to concerns over the local stewardship of public school structures, some of the state courts have required the state governments to provide financial assistance to the cities to replace upgrade school facilities. In other cases, the state government voluntarily chose to do so. In May 1998, the state of New Jersey, for example, was ordered by the New Jersey Supreme Court to replace or refurbish deteriorated school buildings in its poorest 28 school districts. And Governor Christine Whitman, a Republican, responded by proposing to spend $5.3 billion over the next 10 years, of which $2.6 billion would be earmarked for the district. In Virginia, Governor James Gilmore agreed to a new $100 million state-funded school construction program in order to get the state legislature to enact personal private property tax personal property tax cut from automobiles, in which he had promised during his election campaign. As other extremes as our classroom shortages, they often occurred in the suburban fringe or in the exurbs of when the population growth is at its most rapid. School construction often fails to keep pace with the student enrollment. As a result, classroom facilities may be overcrowded. Schools may be temporary mobile classrooms to accommodate growth in students. Um, As a result, classrooms may be overcrowded and schools may temporarily mobile classroom accumulate the growth in students. Often in there's these circumstances, school systems on the suburban and fringe contended that growth in the tax revenues derived from the next new household new households does not keep pace with the higher school construction costs incurred servicing that they argue with the state and federal financial assistance to meet the immediate needs. Okay, combinations of such Michigan contributed to voters supported Proposal A in 1994, a ballot initiative both put forth by the Governor John Engler, represented a Republican, to be in equalizing school funding in school districts throughout the state. Under the Eagle proposal, the voter was or offered a higher state of sales income tax, in which exchanges for local property tax with tax cuts exceeding tax increases. The state used the increased state tax revenue to provide each school district with a $4,800 annual payment per pupil. Among the benefits of the proposal was at the end of the financial burden of large influx of new student can create within school systems on a suburban fringe of the metropolitan areas. The effective result in each of these recent examples change the state and local funding is the state financial support has been substituted by traditional local funding responsibility. Such a trending runs to the risk of individual state governments by encroach further on local educational responsibilities. Efforts to make a school construction a federal responsibility. Although trended toward great centralization of school financial support to be dated, has largely involved with the transfer of responsibility from local to state governments, considering growing of the existing to move some of all representative responsibility further up to the chain of federal government. Washington heretofore has been minor financial players in the education whose assistance to local schools has been confined largely to a series of NIC and add-on education programs. See footnote 7. The changes in 1998, the Congress agreed to include fiscal year of 1999 a federal budget of $1 billion down payment on a federal program to assist the local school system in hiring as many as 100,000 new teachers over the next several years. Such efforts to federalize public school financing are locally Such efforts of federal public school financing are likely to continue through the 106th Congress as the members of both parties attempt to demonstrate the commitment to the public education, which option of the poll suggests is an issue at the top of the list of the voters' concern. But because the education is still very much reasonability of state local governments musting resulting in federal initiatives are likely to direct toward devising new ways of spending more money to elementary and secondary schools. Okay, a flurry of legislation indicated mounting pressure to the to tap the resources of federal government for the school construction. 31 billions for the introduced on schools construction financing during 105th Congress alone. Many of these will reintroduce the year of the prospect enactment as better than before. Among these bills, only statute 239.7. Senator Graham's Public School Partnership Act would encourage the creation of public and private partnership between local public school systems and private for-profit developers, as the concept being implemented successfully into Canada, Great Britain, and even fewer communities inside the United States. Although Statute 2397 did not reach the floor of the Senate for a vote, its language was incorporated and amended by the Education Savings Plus Account Act, H.R. 2646, introduced by Senator Paul Coverdell, a Republican from Georgia. The H.R. 2646 amended the past House Senate with bipartisan support, but was voted by President Clinton for reasons for having more to do with the Senator Coverdell's A-plus accounts than the public-private partnership included an amendment. President Clinton's proposal. In 1998, President Clinton proposed a new federal tax credit to subsidize the interest of the cost of total of $19.4 billion. A special 15-year bond issued by the local school systems to construct and renovate their school systems. According to the Clinton administration, the bonds would cost the U.S. Treasury as an estimated $10 billion in interest rate subsidized over next 10 years. Under the President Modern Schools for the 21st Century proposal, the new federal school bond would be issued over 2 years in face amounts of $9.7 billion per year. They would cover a construction cost about one-third of the public schools accepted to be built during those years. Congress did not include the proposal into the FY 1999 budget. President Clinton attempted unsuccessfully to revive it during the final days of the federal budget negotiations in October 1998. He proposed the initiative again in the FY fiscal year of 2000. Although budget, but he increased the volume of eligible bonds to 22 billion, an alternate to the federal and state borrowing. Although public financing in public schools has been the normal in the United States, all aspects one of the new legislative initiatives introduced at both state and federal level last year, with the perpetual expanding of the practice to tapping into the new governmental sources of money notable at the federal level. In contrast to such proposals, the more public resources to build a public school, as a number of initiative approaches here and abroad clearly demonstrate that the private sector could build a desired facility more quickly, for less money, and this than currently is the case. The early success of the diverse efforts of the public and private partnerships suggests that the key elements of the efforts can be emulated in most other U.S. public school systems. To consider benefit to the students and taxpayers who found their education. Nova Scotia Partnership Approach. In 1997, Canada, provinces of Nova Scotia implemented one of the most obtuse programs to the use of private partnership to facilitate construction of new schools. By the end of 1998, as many as 41 new schools had been either completed or approved for construction under the Public-Private Partnership Program of P3, as it is known officially. 12 and another 12 had been proposed for approval. Drawing on the resources of talent in private sector, The P3, the Public-Private Partnership Program, was implemented as a way to boost public services quickly while making a little impact as possible as Nova Scotia limited budgetary resource. See note 11. Nova Scotia has a population of approximately 947,000, as many and in the Oklahoma City um, metropolitan area, scattered across 55,362 square kilometers, with an unemployment rate hovering at just over 10% and economically still suffering from long-term decline for the North Atlantic fishing industry. A freeze on the provincial capital budget since 1990, efforts of upgrading school system might have been postponed pending on the availability of financial resource. As in 38% of the Nova Scotia provincial budget is covered by transfer payments to the Canadian federal government under the Revenue Sharing Program, and the federal tax revenue wealthier provinces such as Ontario, British Columbia is transferred as affluent provinces. As a result, the persuasive financial shortfalls from the Nova Scotia government needed to tap alternative sources of money, according to the Province Ministry of Finances. The key objective to enable the Nova Scotia taxpayer to get better value for their tax dollars, shifting the responsibility for operating financing the non-core activities of the private sector. In the process, potential exists for the service improve the same public and expenditure framework for the same as the public services to be provided at lesser cost of the taxpayers. 12. A public-private partnership. P3. Public-private partnership relates specifically to schools. That Providence Ministry of Finances notes that school delivered via the public-private partnership will build flexible, high-tech learning environments to support the programs and services for students during the useful life of the school. All technology will be integrated and provided valuable. Support for tools of the student and professional staff. The school will be connected electronically to the neighbor schools so the equitable access to technology is accomplished. The private sector will refresh technology, and will be provided to other schools in the region. The first phase of the Nova Scotia Public-Private Partnership Program encompassed as many as 41 new schools within the 3 years, and 8 already have been completed and now in service agreements on the remaining 30 to 33 was approved and signed in early in 1999. 12 additional schools have been proposed but still await approval under the Private-Public Partnership Program. Nova Scotia Ministry of the Finance requests the bids of the qualified developers provided by the several school facilities built and ministry specifications designated in the district completed with the project as provided on a turnkey basis. The developer furnishes the desks, telephones, backboards, computers, while the school system provides teachers, principals, and students. Prospective qualified compete on the prices of the cost of project converted into 20-year lease with an annual rent payment equal to 85% of the capitalized cost of the project. In effect, the school system gets the building for less than cost of the building to finance it. Well, the developer begins at least 15% in the whole in order for the developer to make up to the difference in cost and earn profit on investment. The contract structured so that the school system leases the building for specific hours such as 8:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Monday through Friday, September through June, as well as select off hour periods during the hours of the days in which this public school is not using facility. The developers can rent it in space to other approved compatible organizations or businesses. Off-hour use. Such off-hours could include renting of the facility for and not for profit educational organizations such as the trade school, refresher educational programs, daycare, community college, university, civic groups, religious organizations, local governments, political groups, similar entities. From the classroom, meeting in an auditorium type space is essential organization business whose purpose activities are not compatible with the building primarily by the children and are prohibited by the leasing of space from leasing space. Such prohibitions are defined clearly in the contract. By using the building more extensive than would be in the case of the occupancy were limited to just public school functions, the developer owner of the building who would obtain revenues or earn more profit. These extra revenues are passed on in effect with the public school in the form of the below cost rent. Because the developers must compete actively with the other providers in space off hours revenue, They have important incentives to ensure the construction is done high quality standards designed to high developers to win the right to construct at least 5 schools. Nova Learning Incorporated also won the province's in 1998 Lieutenant Governor Design Award in Architecture. The lease terms. The school system of a 20-year lease on each facility includes options to renew the lease the same rent up to for additional 5-year terms. Okay, where do we leave off here? And we'll start at lease terms. Uh, because of the lease terms, the school is 20-year lease on each of the facilities, including the option to renew the lease at the same rent for the up to 2 additional 5-year terms. The school system has also an option buying facility predetermined price. If so chosen, most important, school system has no obligation to rent facility beyond the first lease, therefore providing the developer owner with the powerful incentive to maintain the building is its highest standard and upgrade it with the latest technology. If the public system determines that the original developer performed inadequate and it simply can contract with another developer for a new facility, alternative demographic change and provinces and community lead to reduction of school-age children. And the public school system can and elect not to renew any of the many releases to necessary managed facilities, same space with the student population consolidated in students to lease facilities that remain. In any case, Nova Scotia's private partners publishing private partnership program allows the school system to public public-private partnership program allows the school system to shift the number of important technology demographic risks of developer owners, at the same time enhance own flexibility and educational choices at the lower cost that would be the case of the construction financing ownership were entirely the public domain. As any new program that differs significantly old, the first few schools built under the public-private partner program experienced some profit or sorry, some experienced some startup problems in terms with the review of the province of the Auditor General and reported the government to the government in title footnote 14. The particular Auditor General did a comprehensive study of the first completed the public-private partnership school, raised a number of concerns about whether the long-term lease agreement violated the principal provisional budget rules and whether the purported cost savings was significantly enough to justify the program. These and other concerns raised by the Auditor General had been used to modify the program for at least 30 schools most recently approved. Scotland. The Scottish Office, which is the governing body of the responsibility for public initiatives with limited home rules, encourages the government, local communities to utilize private financial resources to fund construction, renovation, public infrastructure such as waterways, treatment facilities, hospitals, state schools. In footnote 15, the program is entitled to Private Financial Initiative (PFI). Private Financial Initiative of Scotland, as is Nova Scotia. The Private Financial Initiative of Scotland has been moved beyond the pilot project stage and now is fully operational component of the government infrastructure, particularly public schools. Once again, that footnote of 14 was Department of Education, Culture, O'Connell Drive Elementary School. The special report of the Auditor General, Halifax, Nova Scotia, July 21st, 1998. As of late November 1998, more than 70 schools were with approximately 50,000 students in 8 local authorities, including Scotland's 2 largest cities, scheduled to be replaced or renovated by the private financial initiative. The Private Financial Initiative of Scotland included in the program with the Glasgow's 29 secondary schools and Edinburgh's 27 secondary and primary schools. The cost of renovation replacement for the initiative is expected to the title of the features of $332 million or $554 million in U.S. dollars, but it will provide the private sector investors. Okay. Once again, PFI's Private Financial Initiative. To encourage the partnership, the Scottish Office provides the subsidized local authorities meet the lease payments and operating costs according to the Scottish Office. The school project taken forward upon private financial initiative will be given. It will generally involve the contract being signed between a local authority and a private sector consortium for the provisions of educational facility infrastructures, along with ongoing maintenance of non-educational operations. The length of contract would normally be around 25 years. The private financial initiative project does not require councils to make the loan to make loans instead of the pay of annual charge for the services. 17. Under the Glasgow City Council has signed a contract with a construction company which will receive 30-year concession of improving manage all city secondary schools. Whether offer first was announced in June 1998, formally expressions of the interest came in around 40 businesses in the first week. These were narrowed down to a group of 6 qualified bidders who competed for this concession. The city accepted the concessionary will upgrade all schools within 3 years, compared with an estimated 15 years above under the former government-run system. The savings will amount to the estimated 30% below it would have cost to upgrade and manage the school facilities. England and Wales. Beginning in 1997, the United Kingdom Department of Education and Employment and began to select a number of proposals of the public-private partnership for schools submitted by the local educational authorities, the LEA. In England and Wales, the financial support of the programs implemented in a comprehensive nationwide pilot project demonstrated the feasibility of alternative partnership with the school facility improvements. In order to encourage the development of submission to a diverse array of the public-private proposals of the local educational authorities, the Department of Education, Employment and Employment offers approved projects of serious financial incentives to facilitate implementation. The department believes that the program designs to test the variety of different techniques will be accurately determine what works, and the lesson learned of these experiments will help to guide the development of more ambiguous, comprehensive programs in the future. To the date, the Department of Education and Employment has approved and funded the projects, and this includes a partnership to rebuild secondary schools in Dorset and another building operating new primary schools in Kingston on Paul Hill. And the third to build a new school music, including the recorded studio in Waltham Forest. In later cases, the private investor of the project accepts to earn a return on his investment by leasing the music facility during after hours. In addition, with 3 projects and another 23 proposals of the local education authority for 293 separate facilities have been approved for the funding of. Now wait for the final contract signing. An additional 18 proposals for more than 194 facilities have been submitted are under review. To encourage submission of additional initiative school construction renovation projects, Department of Education and Employment provides the local educational authority with the financial support to develop their proposals. As of September 1998, 8 additional proposals were under development, of which support. The Department of Education and Employment approval of the project reflects the elasticity mix of the techniques and facilities. In addition to the projects that involve the construction and renovation of school facilities, and the approved projects included 1 long-term contract to replace the school kitchen in 66 Latham schools, provided all school meals as well as meals of the community schools, social service programs like Meals on Wheels for a 10-year period. A joint venture to provide energy repairing supplied at more than 120 schools in the Stoke-on-Trent. Lynn swapped with the developers a new school that allowed them to redeploy school former sites of the other purposes such as housing. That's footnote 20. In several of the land swap projects, the estimated value of the land is used to defray some of the costs incurred with the construction of the new building, therefore relieving the community taxpayers of some financial burden. Once again, there's footnote number 19, the Department of Education, Employment, Government of the United States, Public-Private Partnership, P3 projects and schools project listed in September 1988, and a similar project in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania is authorized in a school facility of a larger plot of land. Okay, continue with how partnership would help the school construction in the United States. The success of the public-private partnership in the other countries offers public part makers of the United States of the framework for developing cost-effective and timely means of financing construction public schools. These countries, as in the United States, decision-making, the operation responsible for public school system lies primarily in local level, albeit varying degrees, and some financial support of regulation guidelines imposed from above. In in both Canada and the United States, schools are running locally operate they under the rules of standard established by the state. Provinces may receive significant financial support from the state or provinces operating capital cost. The construction cost advantage in the United States, publicly funded construction projects are guided by extensive series of costly regulations, mandates such as mandates coming in addition with the normal building safety soundness requirements embodied in the local building costs, which all private public construction projects follow in order to obtaining the building occupancy permits. For example, with an all federal project, the builders must adhere to the provision on the payment of the prevailing wages, environmental review, the minority contract, small business set aside, origin of materials, and other constraints. All these provisions can be substantially to cost construction compared with the cost build an identical structure and local building requirements. The market determined wages. Although such mandates are most costly at the federal level, and states have imposed similar mandates, which added to the cost of the state locally financed projects such as school facilities. Indeed, 31 states have been in their own Davis-Bacon type law mandated the prevailing wages be paid that all state financed projects. Footnote 21. In states from which such restrictive laws exist, all public construction projects, including schools, are likely to cost more than they would if they were built under the competitive conditions that guide all private finance construction projects. Depending on the way of which the federal assistance is ultimately provided, the federal mandates might extend to the part of the U.S. The U.S. economy. There two and four have been free of such burdens, for at least 19 states without prevailing wages, possibly for another 12 states whose prevailing wages were wages less than or less on analysis of their federal law. Even in the absence of state and federal regulation mandates, privately funded and owned private sectors construction projects generally have and cost advantages over the public funding projects. Because the owner has a powerful incentive not to waste money or incur unnecessary costs, the will is directly reduced to eliminate profits. With the public construction operating with the taxpayer money in the absence of the profit incentive, the pressure to keep costs down is compelling, and indeed, to the extent of such building become indeed, to the extent of such buildings becomes monuments to existing political leadership. Therefore, often is temptation toward costly, grandiose designs, frequently is the case with the federal office buildings, government housing projects, and courthouses. Case studies in Florida. The Pembroke Pines Public School, Public School Charter School. The Pembroke Pines, Florida, highlights just how significant the private sector construction efficiency can be. The Pembroke Pines, a public charter school, teamed on the Hazakel Education Services (HES) or Miami, a subsidiary Hazakel company, firmly specializing in design and construction, assisted with living facilities to build an appropriate new facility which opened in September 1998. The cost of the building the school between 22% and 34% below the incurred for each public elementary school built in the recent times. But Hess design, built, and school community financed it with it taxpayer borrowing, owns it and leases it to Hess to operate a charter school. Hess once again is Haskell Education Services. Haskell Education Services receives a state reimbursement of $3,750 per student, which is not significant to pay the both school operating costs. Facility lease payments to the city government. The Haskell Education Services has a powerful incentive to control the costs, increase the revenue as money is saved through the construction efficiencies. For example, means lower the lease of the payments for additional sources of revenue that must be found. In the case of the public-private partnership in Nova Scotia, the Haskell Education Services generates the additional revenue to cover the remaining costs and earning the profit over the fee base after the hours programs at the school at present, such as programs as offered before and after normal school hours, weekends during the summer, including services as daycare, enrichment, other education programs for students. The Haskell Education Services was able to achieve the necessary construction cost savings, primarily design efficiencies, including refrigeration, special purposes rooms otherwise would stand idle during the school day until multi-purpose rooms that they are used more intensively. Traditional teachers planning of the rooms typically occupied space between every two classrooms, which were reconfigured in small computer-based media centers shared by the same two classrooms. These centers contain the several computers offer all learning resources typically found in a school library, thereby obviating the need for large school library because of the charter school plans to have streamlined administrative structures in typical public school. In 43 to 50 states, public school systems have more administrative works than teachers. Less administrative offices space was needed. Classrooms were built smaller, averages size of the floor that fits up to 35 students because of the existing prospect of an overcrowding. The Pembroke Pines committed, however, then limiting class sizes to no more than 25. Another important space of the savings cost came from the contracting of the daily food service, therefore eliminating the need of the cost of commercially in the kitchen facilities such as and staff. Instead, the school has a much smaller Instead, the school has much smaller warming kitchens. It was prepared meals as brought in each day of the food service contract stored in the warming ovens until served in related savings of the cafeteria. Which in many cases is used for only on an hour or so, or a day, is designed to double duty, serving a general purpose meeting room and auditorium. In addition, while serving these other design efficiencies, better management construction allowed for the lower per square foot for the building as well. As a result of the cost efficiency, the Pembroke Pines was built for $8,600 per student station, compared to the Florida State experience is between $11,000 and $13,000 in public elementary schools. The design cost efficient appear to not have deterred parents, students interested in the public charter school. Application school exceeds available space, and enrollment slots that had been allocated way of lottery occurred despite of the fact of the patents occurred despite of the fact that the parents Pembroke Pines students are required to provide 30 hours per year of volunteer service, and it is important to note that the savings is due to the most advantage of the profit-driven in the private school sector design, construction, management efficient compared to the public-private sector building process. The Florida does not burden in the public sector construction of the type of the environment, labor, equal opportunity mandates to the add of the cost of federal funded construction and public construction states that impose such mandates. You have your two footnotes here. As a pet, Brimlow is top heavy Forbes, November 2nd, 1998, pages 60 and 61. Fall Service Charter School opens public PW financing July and August 1998, page 13. Okay, and if Florida did impose the burdens that cost savings of Pembroke Pines, the type project that the privately financed would be likely to grow even larger. This also suggests potential cost benefits. The approach could be quite substantial for about 19 states. The state having strong prevailing wage laws applied to the public construction. Public schools and private work sites. Florida is a home and another emerging concept for the school public-private partnerships. Large corporations that finance construction of public schools are major work sites at the convenience of the working parents. The offering parents with the attractive education minimizes the morning and evening transportation demands and is convenience of the after-school daycare and services and at same facilities. At least two schools exist, one of the sponsored national banks in Jacksonville and another in the Orlando Regional Healthcare System. Executives of the HAZAC Educational Services believe such schools offer the greatest near-term opportunity for public-private partnerships. See 24, footnote 24. Other advantages of public-private partnerships. In addition to the substantial cost of savings, public-private partnerships offer offer compared with the currently publicly financed managed school construction methods. The other significant advantages. Timeliness. Public-private partnership can be shortened the time between the determination of the new school facility as needed by the completion of the project. In many states and communities, acquiring for the funds of major public construction projects entails the complicated length of processing, uncertain outcome. Once needed is recognized. Hearings must be scheduled, held by the community's elected bodies, usually a city or county council, depending on the state or law of the bond issue. Needed to raise the money, then must be submitted to the voters' approval. Sometimes must be wait until the next election, which may be the next year or two away. Because there is no assurance that the voters will approve the bond issuance in 1998, the voters rejected 33% of the school board's issuances. None of the necessary work that was finished prior to the construction, including engineering design and bid solicitation, can go forward until the bond offers is approved. As a result, as many of the 5 years could be passed, the school is ready for the occupancy. By placing the financial responsibility to developer owner, eliminating the need for the public sector to raise the capital, time-consuming political legal approval, and as process can be greatly shortened to the private sector partnership, although the time saved of the vary of the state to the community depending on existing proceeds and laws. While public-private partnerships, once elected officials decide to go forward with a new school, they can go to bidding processes when completing developer owners. Although instead of competing on the price to build, developers compete on the long-term lease rates that will offer. Flexibility. Upon building under the build-to-own process that characterizes the construction build of public facilities today, there is a light leeway in the devising construction financing operation and arrangements that most costly fit for particular needs of the community. For rapidly growing communities with steadily escalating school-age population, classroom space can be added, and the periodic and costly lump whose cost carry initially will exceed the tax revenues generated with new residents and business as a consequence, such as communities often have. Okay, higher than the average of the tax rates. Many respondents simply prohibiting several limiting populations growth of restrictive land regulations or high impact fees on in each new house or apartment. The flexibility of the public-private partnership can overcome the constraints of the design over the capital project packages. Community can grow fit. Such fast-growing communities have capital needs beyond just schools, including libraries, communities. Government's office space, and all of which may exceed the community current borrowing capacity significantly. Such communities may also be short of other non-public facilities such as a daycare, a job training, driver's education, place of worship. Okay, by using Nova Scotia model developers and could build facilities that initially serve as multiple purposes are also used intensively off hours with a variety of company purposes. As the population tax revenue rises, the combined elementary, middle school, and public law library branch could be replaced by the separate facilities of two school and other public library. Under the approach of the fast-growing communities would face rising rental fees with the most closely matching rising tax revenues instead of the periodic large capital expenditures that may be imposing the burdensome debt service requirements of still then tax base. For older established suburbs of the stable overall populations must but widely fluctuating school age populations due to the demographic cycles of the partnership with Nova Scotia approaches would give the community flexibility to add or delete classroom spaces, a minimum cost that would be allowed at the 20-year lease with optional to renew the terminate. If at the end of 20 years, whatever the period is determined appropriate, the school age population decline of the school system could consolidate the remaining students in a smaller number of schools, while the developer bore the risk re-renting the space. And in the event of the demographic cycle repeated to the school system, we could recontract the new space as many of them needed temporarily. If in either event, the risk of the holding cost empty space would fall to the developer's owner, the expertise of the entrepreneurial skill with them better suited to recycle the space quickly, more profitable than its best use. Okay, we're going to read the footnotes. For nationwide school bonds referendum in 1978 and 1998, the table provided the American Baker bond buyer with one State Street Plaza, New York, 10,004. C. Samuel R. Staley. Upon urban sprawl, the Michigan landscape, a market-oriented approach to the Mackinac Center of Public Policy, Reason Public Policy Institution, October 1998, pages 24 through 30, analysis of the cost-burning confrontation of the fast-growing communities. All right, we're resuming where we left off. For certain cities, schools in which the financing mismanagement have been that's inventory for the very old and poorly maintained facilities declining in student enrollment has led to the vacant, unreutilized buildings, ongoing consolidation of students and teachers in better facilities. Here, the public-private partnership could provide a key to the promoting rebuilding, replacing programs, in particular because of many central cities precariously financing conditions that preclude and limit to their access to the bond market. With shrinking need for many of the facilities, such as school systems currently owned at the central city, public-private partnership could incorporate elements of the land swap programs the Department of Educational Employment is trying to, as a way of tapping into the value of the underutilized assets already owned by the system. Such a program could involve either new schools considering the constraints of the land suitable development in many central cities, a substantial renovation of the existing structures. For example, the private company could acquire the deteriorated building under the long-term lease of the renewal, renovating it, leasing it with the back of the school system at the high rent. Of course, more than just building repairs could be involved in the renovation. The contract also could call for the developer to provide a substantial upgrade of the building, telecommunications, information technology, install computers, other learning devices in all classrooms. To extend, the developer could rent the portions of the facility and other users at the after-hour basis. The rent paid by the school system improved of the facility would be less than capitalized of the renovation, as in the case of Nova Scotia's plan for newer construction. Community-wide benefits. In addition, with the obvious improvements, the educational service of the new facility would provide a lesser costly basis of the availability of additional conventional located meeting classroom spaces, would foster other for not-profit activities for the benefit of the members of the community as well as school-age children. Leasing space for one of the or several daycare providers before and after school hours would benefit the worker and the parents, promote the safety of the children who otherwise might be transported from one facility to another, becoming latchkey children at home. Likewise, other non-school sponsored after-school programs could utilize the space, reduce time that children otherwise might spend going from place to place. Moreover, the putting of the after-school services within a single facility of the community would allow students greater access to activities otherwise might not be able to attend. Lack of transportation, similar programs in the interest of the adults, whether the civic programs continue the education work-related refresher, public meetings and job training programs could lease the space in the school building. The private sector interest. Although growing evidence in Canada and Great Britain and a few U.S. communities suggests that the public-private partnership for the school facility can be attractive to the public school system, there is not much determination to include that the concept offers private U.S. real estate investors and developers of an attractive investment opinion. It might be changing, however, the evidence begins to emerge here and there for a few communities and few entrepreneurs experimenting with public-private partnerships for the public schools. For example, the LTC Properties Incorporated in Oxnard, California, real estate investment trust holding nearly $500 million in assets now notes the following. Changing the investment policies quarterly at 10Q reported the U.S. Securities Exchange Commission. Up to this point, the firm had focused excessively in the investment assisted in living facilities. After careful ongoing studies, the child care educational industry during the 6-month ended of June 30th, 1998, the company invested approximately $7,936 for the 2 private schools and 1 charter school. The schools are leased in the publicly traded. The company engaged in the operation of the private charter schools for the preschool through the 12th grade. Examples of Florida Health School Education Services, as well as reported exploratory interest of the country's major financial investors by one of the big 6 consulting accounting firms. may represent the growing interest of the party and part of the investors. It also shows some of the realized opportunity to suggest that they could be even greater than grow in the private investment in the school system once the school system and investors become aware of the opportunity. The federal role in school construction, the influence of the tax except for the borrowing. Although the federal government operates an explicit program to facilitate the funding of the construction of public elementary and secondary schools, it nevertheless is important to influence of the school construction. It also allows local communities to raise money for the public construction by issuing bonds whose interest rate payments are exempt from federal income tax, as well as any state income tax bondholders residing in the state of the issue, making such tax performance available to the investors of municipal bonds a means to lead that the companies are able to borrow at lower cost. Footnotes since we're at 28. LTC Properties Form 10Q for the quarterly period ended in June 30th, 1998, page 7. It was created, however, the government 20 is created, however, the government-sponsored enterprise County Max to facilitate the financing of the construction at college and universities. Continuing at the top, I'll read the last sentence. Making such tax preferences available to investors in municipal bonds means the community are able to borrow the lower cost then they would be in the case of other December 1998 when the long-term AA taxable corporate bonds yielded 6.34%. The high-grade low-term tax-exempt municipal bonds yield at 4.7% and more than 2 percentage points below the tax equivalent. Although the tax-exempt privilege imparts the important benefit communities, enhancing the ability to afford new schools and other public infrastructure, the same privilege under certain circumstances can deter states from utilizing public-private partnerships. The cost advantage of the traditional all-public approach appears at the least costly option, particularly in the alternative, newly large and untried approach, but this is needed to be the case as the growing of the albeit limited experience of some communities with the various aspects of school partnerships suggests. Potential savings, while convinced in public-private partnerships could overwhelm whether the cost of the benefits derived from using a tax exempt over the tax financing. Specifically, is one construction cost of 25% or more is possible with the Pembroke Pines of Florida. Two, the leases can be negotiated with the rent levels equivalent to the 85% of the not lowered as described in one capital cost of the project. Three, the additional cost of savings by achieving avoiding a state of the federal construction mandates of regulations, then a potential savings of the subsidized public-private partnership borrowing. A higher taxable insurance rate could be offset by the savings associated with the use of taxes and borrowing. Some potential savings dependent as they are new and novel way of the building school may be seen as too risky or uncertain for many schools districts to give in a certain using traditional forms of public construction. Considering the difference between taxable and tax exempt rates described above, the public-private partnership utilizing the taxable borrowing rate, would they have to generate the cost of savings of at least 34% compared to the traditional mechanism using tax exempt financing. For example, under the traditional approach, tax-exempt borrowing 4.7% as a school costing $10 million would require an annual interest of $41,700 per year. But if built the public-private partnership borrowing the taxable rate of 6.34%, then the same school would have to build only 6.6 the same school the same all right 6.34%, then the same school would have to build only $6.6 million to equalize such an annual interest cost. The potential cost that disparates between two alternatives makes it difficult for many school systems to take advantage of the private sector alternative. As a consequence, for any of they encourage the local school system to try a cost savings alternative may have the accompanied interim subsidized comparable with the avoidable way of the existing taxes and borrowing and privilege available to state local governments. Legislative direction. Okay, legislative direction. Despite the increase of the school facility partnerships here and abroad, here still is a little awareness in the United States among public schools officials, real estate investors, policy makers, and the benefits of the public-private partnership, the cooperation efforts of the opportunity for the public sector to be more efficient of harnessing the resources skills of the private sector to build more public better schools. Without knowledge of the private sector and opportunities, future legislative initiative at the state federal levels to the boost schools construction could result in more than schools although probably not as many as the needed additional public money spent would be kept the resources from other public needs. They also would run risk becoming another type of federal pork rail project in which any of the congruency between spending and needs occurred when it's by chance. Demonstration projects. To explore initiative alternatives to federal government, local offices should establish federal, state, and just demonstrating programs with the financial incentives to encourage local public and school officials to sign on. The federal financial incentives and a program to demonstrate the feasibility benefits of the public school construction, though public and private partnerships could be structured and so not to additional spending into the budget and increasing tax revenue losses. The traditional approach of the public school construction already entails a significant federal subsidized virtue of tax exempt status, generally obligation bonds. The community issues the fund in their school to issues to fund their schools. The extent of the public schools would be built by the renovated by the subsidized other by through new public-private demonstration program portion represents schools that would have been built and renovated with funds borrowed in taxes and municipal bonds. This would not be likely to be one for one offset if any of the given year, but the new net cost per year could be given a small fraction of the total cost because of the substituted effect. A good starting point, a good platform to initiate the demonstrative incentive program could be the Public School Construction Partnership, which was introduced into Statute 2397 of Senator Bob Grams during the 105th Congress. The bill proposed the amending of the federal tax allowed by the use of tax-exempt private activity bonds for the construction of privately owned school facilities leased back to the public school system. Under the current law, each state is provided with an annual allocation based on the public population of tax-exempt private activity bonds to be used for such purposes of economic redevelopment, manufacturing, student loans, home mortgages, but not public schools. A business as large as Fortune 500 company can use the bonds to build a refurbish or for-profit manufacturing facilities, but a company that wants to provide a building to the public system is ineligible. Senator Graham bills would rectify the exclusion, increasing each of the state bond allocations an additional $10 multiplied by the state population, so the additional use of the tax-exempt borrowing privilege would not come to the expense of the other users, including the major manufacturing corporations. To address the concerns with the potential increase in loss of the tax revenue, Senator Graham bills could modify to extend the use of the taxes and private activity bonds, the private-owned public school facilities, but not increase the state cap of the issuance private activity bonds beyond the already scheduled to go in effect in the next few years. The change would force the corporation's hydroelectric projects or other for-profit redevelopment projects to complete with the school for the available existing federal tax benefit. Alternately, Senator Graham proposed increase to the caps, ensuing the loss of the federal revenues could be maintained in legislation. Revenue could be offset, and the inclusion of legislative changes would be gaining revenues. On such a possible legislative change is added to somewhat modified version of the Higher Education Bond Parity, which introduces the statute 1880 and 105 Congress of Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, a Democrat from New York, and S 1880 would be prohibited the use of tax-exempt general obligations for being used of the build costly stadiums or arenas for owners of the professional sports team. The resulting revenue would be used to increase the private activity bonds that private universities, colleges could issue. But including private-owned schools that are at least to public school system investment are eligible for the use of saving achieved for the Moynihan bill. Some of these are potential revenue loss of the new program would be offset, improving flexibility. Okay, we're at improving flexibility. Congress might want to consider some of the modifications of Graham to allow for more flexibility structure in the nature of such arrangements between private developers and public school systems as currently written and the bill would require for the arrangements be on the bill of an own transfer BOT type, which means that at the end of the lease terms, which would be not exceed the term of the underlying bond, the facility would revert the school system at no additional cost. Although the arrangement could be appropriate in some situations, it would preclude that the arrangements that could be more advantages to the school system in certain community circumstances. It would be limited to the opportunity experiments, the techniques to determine which would be better under the different circumstances. For example, by allowing lease agreements For example, allowing lease arrangements for the permitted or required the developer to retain ownership beyond the initial lease terms. The Nova Scotia approach, the developer would have the powerful incentive to maintain, upgrade the building, and in order to encourage the school system to release the facility. In addition, the school system would avoid the risk of having to retain the potential obsolete, unneeding the building could be as old as 20 to 30 years old lease by the lease ends. Permitting the lease, the developer retains the ownership of the perpetual propriety would allow the school system to negotiate lower annual payments for the would-be case of the developer having relinquished the building at the end of the lease terms. And another limiting component of the Graham bill, they should be modified in requirements nearly all state allocations to issue such bonds be used for the school system experience repaid growth of the student population. The provisions probably would cover the communities in the fast-growing states of the South and West, but in the slower-growing North and Midwestern states, the bill's qualification limited to the other bonds. Other use of the bond is largely distant. Also, would prohibit the programs used except for the $5 million per set in order to center city declining student populations often occupied deteriorated structures. Okay, where were we? $5 million per state. Well, in older central cities who decline students' population then occupy the old deteriorated structure. Pennsylvania, which has a student population over just $12 million, Graham bill would allow it to issue the $120 million in such public-private partnership bonds per year, but $5 million of the amount would have to be shared by the Chester, Harrisburg, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and perhaps six other declining cities in which the substandard school can be normal. In such cities in which renovation rather than new construction represents the most cost-effective response to school facilities needed, public-private partnership could help to restore aging structures as they do in the public-private financial initiative Scotland program is Glasgow, Scotland. Um, By allowing states more flexible allocation special bonds proceed systems in which the needs is greater than public-private partnerships approach, which with having the opportunity to demonstrate its efficiency and versatility under the variety of different conditions and needs. And out of the many varied demonstrated projects would arise a series of successful techniques, concepts, approaches that could be implemented in state and localities across the country. The conclusion: many proposals to move the federal government into providing financial support for the public school construction confronting Congress for the two considerable risks. The first is the prospecting creating a new budget-busting spending program that very easily could be another costly pork barrel program. The last restraint of the Congress demonstrating the regard of such infrastructure program, highway water projects, spill over easily of the new school construction program. Members of the Congress attempted to demonstrate the commitment to the education. And the second risk of such a program could greatly expand and to scope powerful the federal government into an area of the traditional been the responsibility of the local, state, and the governments, even if the program was orientated initially to nothing more than providing cash for the school construction. The temptation to add controlling strings of the cash would difficultly for politicians to resist. Every one of the added strings would undetermine the local control of or public education system. Other than Maine's public school construction proposal likely to come before Congress, the approach be embodied by Senator Bob Graham's Public School Partnership Act would allow Congress to avoid risk, which would at the same time allow the local school system to tap the vast financial and management resources of the American private sector officers. Ronald D. Utt, the PhD of the Grover M. Herman Fellow in Federal Budgetary Affairs at the Heritage Foundation. That is the conclusion to that. Okay, what you find here is an information return from tax exempt. This form is an 8083. Private activity bonds. There's part one: issuer's name, the number and street, city, and name, and name of issue, name of title of officer or legislator may call. This is an 808. Once again, form 808 by the Department of Treasury of the Internal Revenue Service, revised in January 2nd. The Office of Management number is 154507220. Under the Revenue Section Code of 149E, see separate instructions. And if it goes over the type of issuance, checks of the box and into the issue of the price of airports, docks, washers, mineral sewage, solid waste disposal, sewage facilities, water furnishings facilities, dock, air supports, qualified residential rental projects, meeting 25 to 50% of the test, meeting 20 to 40 to 60 tests, and this is section 142D1B. Meeting has an election has been made the deep rent skewing. 14284B. Facilities under local furnishing electronic energy, gas, and facilities under allowed a transactional rule of Tax Reform Act of 1986. Um, Facility type 1986 Act section qualified enterprise zone facility bonds section 139(4)C instructions qualified improvement zone facility bonds District Columbia enterprise volume zone facility bonds 1400A qualified public education facility bonds 142A3 and 142K. Other described see instructions qualified mortgage bonds check qualified veterans mortgage bonds arbitrage profits of the United States, qualified small issue bonds, see section 144A. Check the box of $10 million of small issue exceptions. Qualified student loan bond, qualified redevelopment bond, qualified hospital bond, non-hospital bond. Check 95% more than net needs of the capital expense. 19. Non-governmental output property bond are treated on private activity bond of section 141D other to describe issue. The description of the bonds, final maturity issued price and stated redemption price and maturity and D weighted average maturity year and yield. Considering with part 4 use of proceeds issued proceeds of the accrued interest of the price of the entire issuance proceeds of the use of bond issuance is underwritten discount proceeds of just credit enhancement proceed allocated response revenue serves replacement fund reprocess currently refunded prior use of the part 4 part 6 and proceeds of advanced return funds prior complete part 7. Adds lines 24 through 28. Non-refunding proceeds of the issue. Subtract 29 from line 23. Enter amount here. Description of the property finance. Non-refunding of the proceeds. The total lines of 31A through E and below are equal to 30 above. Do not complete the for a qualified student loan bond. Qualified mortgage bonds or qualified veterans bonds, land, building, structures, equipment recovery period of more than 5 years, equipment recovery period in 5 years or less, or other North American industry classification system. The NAICS projects financed with the funding proceeds. These are the codes and the amount of the non-refunding proceeds and the NSA codes and more non-refunding proceeds. Description of refund bonds remain average maturity bond at its current refund and its advance fund refund and the latest date of the refunds will be called enter the date of the refund bonds issued miscellaneous. Part 7. Name of the government units approving issues. The checkbox designated any issues in Section 265B3B 1 and set part 3. Arbitrage. If you have elected to pay a penalty to lieu of arbitrage rebate, check the box of identified. If a hedge, see the instructions for a hedge in part 40. Check the box in compromise qualified redevelopment qualified small issue exempt from the facility bonds provided by the end item number of the private user name. Part 8. The amount of state volume calculated although the copy of the state certification amount of the issue subject to the unified state of the volume cap. Amount of the issues not subject to the United States volume cap other than violation limitations of the bond governmental owned solid waste facilities, air docks, wharves, environmental enhancements, hydroelectric generating facilities, high-speed intercity rails facilities. Under a carry forward electronic under carry forward election attached to the copy of the date 32A the return. Under the transitional rules of Tax Reform Act of 1986, they enter the Act section under the exemption of the current refund of Section 146(1) and Section 133A of the Tax Reform Act of 1986. 45A and B as the amount of the issue qualified with the veterans bond and the enter the state limit on the qualified ventures mortgage bonds. veterans mortgage bonds. Amount of 139.4 volume cap allowed to issue the attached to the local government certification name of the empowerment zone amount of the section 142K volume cap allocated to issue or attached to the state of the certification. A signature under the penalties. I declare the exam to. I have examined this return and accompanies the schedule statements and, to the best of my knowledge, in brief and the true and correct completely. The sign of the officer name and above over officer and date and type of the title of the other officer. All right, here we go. Instructions for the Form 808, Department of Treasury Internal Revenue, the revisions of January 2002. Inventory of revenue taxes and privatory activity bonds issue. A change to note. Recent legislation added a new section of 142A13, qualified public educational facilities, to list the exempt facility bonds effective of the obligation issued after the December 31st, 2001. See qualified public educational facility on this page. General instruction purpose of the form. The Form 8038 is used for the issuers of tax-exempt private activities bonds to provide IRS with the information required of the Section 149 monitor the requirements to Section 141 through 150. Who must file? Issuers who must separate from the Form 8038. Each issuer is following the tax-exempt private activity bonds issued after 1986. Exempt facility bonds, qualified mortgage bonds, qualified veterans mortgage bonds, qualified small issue bonds, qualified student loans, qualified redevelopment bonds, qualified hospital bonds, qualified 501c3 bonds, non-governmental output property bonds, tax ventures, veterans land bonds, Oregon small city energy conservation renewables resource loan bonds, Iowa industrial news jobs training bond Iowa industrial new job training bonds, all other tax exempt private activity bonds. When to file? File Form 8038 on the 15th day of the second month after the close of the calendar quarter in which the bond was issued. The Form of 8038 may not be filed before the issue must be completed based on the facts of the issue's date. The late filing, an issuer may be granted an extension time to file the 8038 under the Section 3 of the provisions of the Proclamation 88. Proclamation 88/10, 1998, 1CB, 635. It determines the failure to file the set time is not due to the willful neglect time. The type of the print at the top of the form. The statement is submitted to the accordance of the revenue of the proclamation of 8810. The attached to the form 8038. A letter examining the form of the 8038 will be notified, and the time also indicated whether the bond issue is in question under the examination of the IRS. So do not submit the copies of the trust indenture of the bond documents and to see whether they file to the next. Where to file? For the form of the 8038, the attachments Internal Revenue Service Center of Ogden, Utah 84201. Signature. An authorized representative of the issuer must sign the 838 applicable certification. Also print the name and title of the person signing the Form 838. So it's got to be an authorized issuer must sign the form of the 838. Other forms may be required. For the bonds other than private activity bonds, Form the 8038G, information return of the tax-exempt governmental obligations, and Forms 8038GC, information return of the small tax-exempt governmental bonds, issues, and lease and installment and sales, and comply with these requirements. Bonds described in Section 1312 of the CT's Tax Reform Act of 1986, which the transitional rules in Section 1312 and 1313 apply for the non-private activity bonds. For the bonds of the information reporting, the report then on the form of the 8308G and 8038GC for rebating arbitrage for the paying of the penalty in lieu of the arbitrage rebate of the federal government using the form of 8038T, the arbitrage rebate penalty in lieu of the arbitrage rebate. The rounding off of the whole dollars, we may show the mounting items of this return with the whole dollar all amounts to do so. Any amount of less than 50 cents increases the any amount of the 50 to 99 cents next higher dollar. Tax-exempt bond is an obligational interest that excludes the gross income under the Section 103 for Internal Revenue Code. The Private Activity Code, this includes the obligation issued as part of the issuers in which more than 10% of the proceeds are used from the private businesses and use and more than 10% of the payment principal interest of the issue either is secured in the interest properties of the used in the private business or use of the payments for such priority to be derived from the payments of the property borrowed money or used of the private business is also included in the bond with the proceeds in which are the or sorry to be it also includes a bond proceeds in which they are to be used directly or indirectly to become financial loans, other than loans described in Section 141C2 and persons of other governmental unions succeed for the lesser of 5% of the proceeds of $5 million. Exempt facilities. So it's $5 million for financing loans, and I don't know, or exceed less than 5% of their proceeds or $5 million. Exempt facility bonds. This is a part of the issuance of 95% more than net proceeds or which to be financed exempt for the facility listed in Section 142A1 through the 13. Exempt for the facility bonds included qualified enterprise zone facility bonds for the use of empowerment zones and enterprises communities. Qualified publication, educational facilities, or private activities in which the tax-exempt bonds are issued, including the elementary, secondary, public school, and facilities that are owned by the private for-profit corporation, the public-private partnership arrangement with the state, local educational agency, and are operated for the public agency as imparted by the public school system. The term school facility includes the school buildings, other facilities that are related to, such as stadiums, athletic facilities used for the school events, and appreciable personnel property is used in connection with the school facility. A public-private partnership is defined an arrangement in which defined as arrangement for the for-profit corporation construction, rehabilitation, refurbishes equipment, equips the school for the public school agency. The agreement must provide that at the end of the contract, the ownership of the bond finance priority transferred to the public school agency at no additional consideration. The requirements of the Section 147 of the and acquisition do not apply for the qualified public educational facility bonds. Also, separate stated volume capital and carried rules apply for the C Section 142K for details. Qualified mortgage bond. This is part of the issue. This is part of the N issue. One, a qualified mortgage bond. This is of which all proceeds except for the issuance costs reasonable required reserves to be used for financing owner of the occupied residence. Two, meet the requirements of the subsection C and I and M7 and of Section 143. This does not include the private business test of Section 141B1, 2, for which the repayments of the principal financial providing the issuing that they are received that over more than 10 years of the date of issuance are used to redeem the bonds that are part of the issues amount of less than $2,500,000 not to be used redeemed in bonds under this requirement. Qualified veterans mortgage bonds. This is part of this is part of an issuance of which 95% of which of the net proceeds are used to provide a residence for the veterans. Two, for with the payment principal interest is secured by the general obligation of the state. Three, the meets the requirements of subsection CG1 and 1 of this Section 143. This does not meet the private business test of Section 141B12. Qualified small businesses. This part of the issuance exceeds $1 million, of which 90% of which 95% or more net proceeds are used to be financed. A, by the depreciable property. To C, the remediation of the prior issuance. A, B, and C, Section 141A. The $1 million limit can be increased to $10 billion. The $1 million limit can be increased in $10 million if an election is made of the certain capital expenditures into an account. See the regulation Section 103/10B24, or sorry, 6. Qualified student loan bond. This part of an issuance is which 90% or more of the net proceeds are to be used to make the financial student loan of the program general application of the higher education of 1965 applies to C Section 144B11 For additional requirements, 95 more than the net proceeds are to be used to make a financial student under the program of the general application approved by the state. See Section 141B1B for additional requirements. Qualified redevelopment bond. This is in general part of the issuance, and 95% more than net proceeds are used to be financing certain specified real property acquisition or development. Blighted areas. See Section 144C. The other requirements. Qualified 501c3 bond. This is any of the private activity bond that meets the following conditions: all property financed and the net proceeds of the bond issuing to owned by a 501c organization or governmental unit. The bond would not be private activity bond and if a Section 501c3 organization would be treatment of the government used with respective activities that do not constitute unrelated trades determined in the applying section of 513 and privately actively bond definition applied for the 5% threshold instead of 10% for the private use. Security for the and/or payment test and the activities constitute unrelated trades. The businesses are aggregated with any other private use or security or payment. A qualified 501c, the bond includes a qualified hospital bond, part of an issue with which 95% or more of the net is preceded as to be used in the hospital. Qualified non-hospital bond and other qualified hospital bond in general, an organization cannot have more than $150 million of qualified 501c3 non-hospital bonds. See Section 145B of However, the limit does not apply to the bonds issued after August 5th, 1997. If 95% or more of the net proceeds of the issue are to be used solely for the capital expenditure, including that after the restrictions apply to the qualified 501c bonds that both hospital and non-hospital provide residential rental housing. See Section 145D. Issuer's price. The issuer price obligation is generally determination of the regulation Section 1.148(1)b, which then was issued for the cash. The issue cash is the prices which the substantial amount of the obligation sold to the public. Determining the issue obligation issued for the property. See Section 1273, 1274 related to regulations. Note the issue price does not include interest from the date of the bonds as dated for the date of the issuance. The issue general of the bonds treated for the part of the same issue as they are issued with the same issue at the same date and single transaction seriously related in transaction. Arbitrage general. Generally interest of the state local bonds for the normal tax exempt unless other issuers of the bond rebate to the United States arbitrage profile profits earned from the investing proceeds of the bond of the higher yielding non-purpose reinvestment. See Section 145, 148F. Construction of issuance. The issuance is a tax-exempt bond that meets both of the following conditions. At least 75% of the available construction proceeds are to be used in construction expenditure with respect to the property to be owned by the governmental unit or 501c organization. All bonds that are a part of the issued qualified from 510c bond 3 bonds are non-private activity bonds. The private activity bonds issued by the financing property to be owned by the government unit of 501c3 organization. In lieu of rebating an arbitrage that may be owned by the United States, the issuer construction issued may be the revocable election to be pay the penalty as a penalty equal to 1.5%. 1.5 or 1.5% of the amount of construction proceedings do not meet the current spending requirements. See Section 145.4c instructions that Form 8038T specific instruction Part 1. Reporting authority, amending a return. If you are filing an amended form of the 8038, check the amended return box complete with Part 1 and only these parts of the 8038 is amending the use of the same report knowledge. It is used for the original report. Do not amend the estimated amounts of the previously reported out once actual amounts as determined. Line 1, the issuer names the name of the entity issuing the bond, not the name of the entity receiving the benefit of the financing. The second line is the issuer that does not have an employer identification number, or should an EIN, an employer identification number, should apply for one at the forms SS4 application employer identification number. You can get this at the IRS website at www.irs.gov or by calling 1-800-TAX-FORM 1-800-829-3676. You may receive an EIN at the telephone following the instruction to the form SS4. After line 4, after being printed, 1, enter the 2 Choose self-designated numbers. Number of the reports consecutive during any calendar year, e.g. 134, 135, etc. Line 6. The date of the issuance generally for the date of the issue physically exchange the bonds of the underwriters other than the purchase funds. So line 7. If there's no name of the issuance, please provide the identification of the issue. Line 8. Enter the Community Uniform Security Identification procedures. CUSIP, number of the bond in which the latest maturity of the issue does not have the CUSIP number written in the note. On Part 2, type of issuance. Selections referred to the Part 2 are made in the original bond documentations on this form. You must identify the type of the bonds issued by checking the appropriate boxes and entering the corresponding issuance to see the issue price and the definitions. Line 11F, enter the issuance of the check of the appropriate box, the percentage test elected by the issuer, the type issuance of the bond, then check the appropriate box to check whether an election was made for a deep rent skewing. See Revenue Rule 94 through 57, 1994 2, CB5 for guidance of the computing of the income limits applicable to these bonds. Line H4, bonds issued for finance certain facilities may also qualify to acceptable facility bonds if and were permitted except for the facility under the prior law issued under one transitional rule as tax reform as Act of 1986, the 1986 Act. These facilities include a sports facility as described in the former Section 103B4B, a convention or trade show facility 103B4C, parking facility 103B4D, a pollution control center facility 103B4, hydroelectric facility 103B4H, and an industrial park 103B5. If one and above applies, indicate the facility type and then gives the specific provisions of the 1986 Act pertaining to the facility of line 11H. Line 11I. Check the box of the bonds parts of the issuance more than net proceeds of which are to be used and provided. The enterprise zone facility empowerment and vote zone of the enterprise community. See section 139. Check on the 139.4. Note, check the box on the line LJ for the empowerment zone of the facility bonds, or the LK for the District of Columbia enterprising zone facility bonds. Line LJ. Check the box if the bonds are issued on August 5th, after August 5th, 1997, for the part of the issuance of 95% or more than the net proceeds or which are to be used provided by the empowerment of the zone facility. See section 1394. The updated information of the designated urban employment zone available for the HUD-Gov and the designated rural improvement zones. Go to eziac.gov. Line LK. Check the box bonds issued after December 31st, 1997, the part of the issuance 95% more than the net proceeds of which are to be used in District of Columbia enterprise zones. To see section 1400A other than requirements. 11L. Check the box of the bonds that are issued on December 31st, 2001. After December 31st, 2001. Parts of an issuance of 95% or more than net of the proceeds of which was provided by the qualified public educational facility. See section 142K for the other requirements. Line 11M, check the box only if none or other of the boxes only space provided enter the facility type. Facility types included as described in each sections: mass commuting facilities 142A3 and 142C, local district heating and cooling facilities 142A and 9 and 142G, environmental enhancement hydroelectric generation facility 142A12 and 142J, high-speed intercity rail interfacilities 142A1, A11 and 142C and 142I. Okay, proceeds and expect the bonds may not be used in facility type if there's a non-governmental owner of the facility unless the owner makes an irrevocable election not to claim a 1 depreciation under 167, 168, any credited against the income tax with respect to the property financed with the net proceeds of this issue. This is the note of the line 11M, which is Okay, line 13. Check the box on line 13 if the issuer is elected for the bond indenture related document to pay to the United States of the amount described in section 14G 3D. Line 14. Check the box with line 14 if the bond is an exempt issued $10 million or less of the election under the section of 144A4 have been made to the issuer at before the time of the issuance of the bonds on its records. See Regulation Section 101.310B2 6. Line 17. Attach the schedule listing of the name, the end item code for each 501c organization benefiting from these qualified hospital bonds. Line 18, enter the total amount of qualified non-hospital bonds described in Section 145B2 for the part of the issuance for each of the 105C3 organizations benefiting from the qualified non-hospital bonds. Attaching schedule listing the name of the organization, the end item code, the amount of the issuance of the bond benefiting from the organization. If the box of line of 18 is not checked, the amount of other non-hospital outstanding of the date of the issuance benefit organization. Note, the amount of the item in item 4 above pluses, the 18 cannot exceed $150 million with respect to the bonds is issued A to the prior August 6, 1997, after August 5, 1997, issued for the non-capital expenditures. $150 million does not apply to the bonds issued after August 5, 1997, if 95% or more of the net proceeds are usually solely capital expenditures incurred after the date. Line 19, and check the box to the bond if box and bonds are accurate in non-governmental output priority which the government used by the non-governmental person in connection with the output facility, such as an electric or gas power project. Line 20, check the box only if the other boxes in space provided enter the description of the bonds. Example, the Texas Veterans Land Bonds, Oregon Small City Energy Conservation Renewable Resource Loan Bonds, and Iowa Industrial New Jobs Training Bonds. Part 3, description bonds. Description of bonds. Line 21. For column of A, the final maturity of the date of the last date of the issuer must redeem the entire issue. For the column B, see the issuer's price under the definitions on page 2. The following for the column C, the stated redemption price of the maturity of the enterprise, the sum stated redemption price of the maturity each of the bond issued at the part of the issuance. Following column D. For column D, the weighted average maturity is sum of the products of the issued price of each maturity, the number of the years of the maturity determined separately from each of the maturity taken into account of the mandatory redemptions, dividend, the issue price of the enterprise from line 21, column B. From the column E, the yield definition of the section 148H, the discount rate of when used in the compute the present value of all payments of the principal interest to be paid on the obligation, producing the amount of equal to the purchase price, including accrued interest. See the regulation section 148 for the specific rules compute the yield of issuance if the issuance is variable rate of the VR. If it's a variable rate issue, it's VR in the yield of the issuance. For other variable rates, issuance carried the yield out of the decimal place to e.g. 5.3152% as an example. Part 4. Use of proceeds. Line 22, they enter the amount of the proceeds which will be used to pay the interest of date of the amounts of our date of the issuance. Line 24, the amount of the proceeds that will be used to pay the bond of issuance costs, including the fees of the trustee and bond counsels. Enter the amount of the proceeds that will be paid the fees, the credit enhancement that are taken into account of determining on the yield of issuance per purpose of section 148H of the e.g. bonds, premiums, and certain fees of the letters of the credit. Line 24, the amount of the proceeds that will be allocated to such funds. Line 27 and 28, the amount of the proceeds that will be used to pay the principal interest of the and other issues bonds. Part 5, description of the property finance and non-refunding proceeds. 3. Part 5, description of the property financed by non-refunding proceeds. Line 31, enter the amount of non-refunding proceeds received by the issuer used to finance the receipt, real depreciate personal property. If the amounts are not available at the time of the issuance, make a reasonable proper proration between the land of the buildings and the equipment. Note, under section 147C, the private activity bond is not qualified as a bond if 25% or more of the proceeds are used in the acquisition of land. If any of the proceeds are used to acquire farmland or other any amount of the proceeds are not in excess of $250,000 to be used in the first-time farmer, in exemption of the general rule for the land acquired for the certain environmental purposes. See section 147C3 allows for the bond not qualified as the bond proceeds as used the acquisition or used property other than land. Also, bonds that is not qualified bond is a proceed to use the non-acquisition use of the property, other land, except In the case of a certain rehabilitation, see Section 147D. For the items that do not readily fit within categories 31A, B, C, and D, enter the amount of the proceeds in category C, 31E. Other briefly describe them on the line. Line 32, each of the project finance and the issuance enter the corresponding 6 digits North American Industry Classification System, the NAICS code that best describes the project. Facing the amount of the project that's more the four project finance to the issuance. Attach a separate sheet of the paper stating the NAICS code for face amount of each project. For the purpose of determining the NAICS code of the project of more than one category, the ultimate use of the facility determines the NAICS code number. For the example, investing partnership financing manufacturing facility should be the relevant manufacturer of the NAICS code, not the partnership financial activity code. The NAICS codes are available at the U.S. Census Bureau website of the census.gov NAICS. Part 6, description of refund of the bonds. Complete the part only of the bonds are to be used to refund of the prior issue of the tax-exempt pre-activity of bonds. Line 34 and 33 and 34, the remaining weighted average maturity is determined without the regard of the refunding. The weight of the average maturity is determined on the same manner as the line 21 of the column D. The line 35, the enter the last date of which any of the bonds that are being refunded will be called. If in line 36, if more the single issuance bonds be refunded, enter the date of the issuance of each of them issues. Part 7. Miscellaneous. Under the rules of Section 147F, the private activity bonds are not acceptable unless they are receiving public approval for the certain official voter referendums, entering the name of the governmental units approving the issuance, entering also the date of the approval applicable elected representative, the date of the public hearing of the alternative, enter the date of the voter referendum. If under the rules of Section 147N, no approval is needed because the issue meets the exception in the public approval requirement. Right, the non-approval needed for the line 37, enter the 37 of the provision Section 147F under the issuance except for the e.g. Section 147F2G if under the transitional rule with the transitional rule applicable Act of AG Tax Reform Act of 1986 section and this in section. Line 39. Check the box if it is issues a construction issuance or revocable election to pay a penalty to in lieu of the arbitrage of the rebate has been made before the date of the bonds are issued. The penalty payable within the form 8038T for each of the 6-month period after the date of the bonds issued. Do not make a payment of the penalty in lieu of the arbitrage rebate of the form. See provision procures 92 to 22, the 1992 1 CB 3736 rules regarding the election box. Line 40. Check the box if the issuer is if identifying the hedge of the books of the records in accordance with the regulation section 1.148H2 8 148.4H5. This permanent issuer of the tax-exempt bonds identifying the hedge of included the yield calculation computing arbitrage. Line 41. Check if the box if the issue is compromised is described in the section qualified. If it is compromised, qualified redevelopment bond is 144C. Qualified small bonds 144A. Exemption facility bonds 148-2A4 through 142A11 and 142A13. One of the above applies the enter of the name of the ending item code public-private user, non-governmental entity that meets the public-private business test of the section 141B, private loan financing test of 144C. Part 8, volume cap. Line 42, enter the amount of volume cap allocated by the issuer. Attach the copy of the state certification. If applicable, state officials must certify the issue may requirements of Section 146 related to the volume cap pre-activity bond. See regulations under Section 149E. The certification must include the information requested for the lines through the 1, 3, and 5 through 8 on the page 1 of the Form 8038, as well as the line as well as the title of the certifying official. Line 43, the amount of the issue subject to the United States volume cap. The private activity bonds under the Section 146 under the Section 141 non-qualified amount is issued and exceeds $15 million must not exceed or the amount of that would cause the bond which is part of the issuance would be treated the private activity bond. The issuer must allocate the part of the volume cap of the non-qualified amount of over $15 million. Line 44A, enter the amount of any bond issuance on the part of the issuance of the financing except for the bond that are not subject to the volume of the cap. These facilities are including docks, airports, docks, wharves, environmental enhancements, hydroelectric generators, high-speed waste facilities. These facilities may not have to be governmental owned. See Section 14.6. Um, um, High-speed financing intercity rail facilities. No, only 75% except for the facility bond of these facilities is not subject to the volume cap. However, no volume cap applies if all the bond financed property is governmentally owned. See Section 46G and 142B and 1B. Um, line 44B. If any part of the issuance is under the carry forward election under the amount of the bonds being issued under the election attached to copy applicable. Form 830, 8328, 8328, Form 8328, carry forward election of the unused private activity bond volume cap. Line 44C, if any part of the issuance is not subject to the cap under the Transitional Rule of the Transformation Act of 1986, the appropriate section acted the amount of the bonds except for the volume cap of the rule. Line 44D, any of the body issued currently refunded and another bond and is subject to the volume cap of the extent of the amount of such a bond does not exceed the outstanding amount of the refund bond. See Section 146A. 146I, see Section 133A of the Tax Reform 1986, enter the amount of not subject to the volume cap. 145B, enter the stated limit of the qualified veterans mortgage bonds for the calendar year under the Section 143I, I3. Line 46A, they enter the amount of the volume capital allocated for the issuer attached to the copy of the local government certification applicable official must certify that the issue must have requirements of the available volume cap under the Section 139.4 certification must include the information requested by the lines of 1, 3, and 5 and 8 on the page of 1 of the Form 083 as well as the title of the certifying official. Line 46, enter the name of the empowerment zone. See the instruction of the line 11J for where to get the names of the empowerment zones. Line 47, the amount of volume capital allocated for the issue attached with the copy of state certification. If applicable, state officials must certify the issuer must volume cap the requirements section 142KH. Certification must include the information requested in lines 1 through 5 and the 8 on the pages 1 through Form 8038 as well as the title of certifying officials. Paper Reduction Act notices. We ask the information of the form carry out the internal revenue laws of the United States as is required. The government give us the information we need to get ensure that they are complying with these laws. You are not required to provide information requested as a form of the subject paperwork reduction unless the displays of the valid office management of budget control books and records relating to the form of the instruction must be retained as long as their content may become materially administrative than any internal revenue, generally tax returns, return information, confidential as required. See Section 6103. Time needed to complete for the file of this form will depend on the individual circumstance. The estimated average time learning about the law form is 10 hours. The time needed for complete and file this form, depending on the individual circumstances. Estimated average time is learning about the law and form is 10 hours to 35 minutes. Preparing the form is 12 hours to 27 minutes. Copy, assembling, and sending the form to the IRS is 16 minutes. If in comments concerning the accuracy, time, estimated suggestions from the simpler, happier to hear, you can write the tax form committee, Western Area Distribution Center, Ranchos Cordova, California 957430001. Do not send this form to address instead. Do not send this form to this address. Instead, see where to the file on page 1. And guys, this has been, and that is your ABC school funding with a the background executive summary by Ronald D. Upman, PDH.